Hey, everyone, you ever get that feeling? Like you're waiting for something huge, something that just feels inevitable, like humanity getting back to the moon. It's been over 50 years since Apollo. We've made some incredible technological leaps since then, yet here we are, still stuck on Earth. Why is that? Why have that? That's the question we're diving into today. And joining me to kind of navigate this puzzle is our expert.
Hello.
We are armed with this fascinating article from Scientific American called Why Is It So Hard to Go Back to the Moon?
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but I'm ready to unpack why this mission seems even more daunting now than it did during the Apollo era.
Yeah, it's a question that sparks a lot of head scratching for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So for anyone who has not been glued to NASA updates, the Artemis program, that is our current lunar roadmap, Artemis 2, the mission with everyone holding their breath, is aiming for a crewed trip around the moon, similar to Apollo 8, sometime in fall 2025. And it's but things haven't exactly been smooth sailing.
Well, and it's important to note with Artemis that it's designed to be a whole lot more than a sentimental journey back to the moon. This is about establishing a sustainable presence, a stepping stone for even grander ambitions like Mars.
Exactly. But this ambition comes with a hefty price tag.
It does.
We are talking delays a projected budget of $93 billion by 2025, and a recent NASA Inspector General audit that flagged some critical issues needing a fix before we, strap astronauts back into a rocket.
Yeah.
Issues like the Orion capsule's heat shield behaving unpredictably.
Yeah, the heat shield is absolutely crucial.
Yep.
Because it's what protects the crew and the spacecraft from burning up on re-entry. To have it behaving erratically is a major concern.
And then there are those power system anomalies that popped up, which, if I understand correctly, could impact pretty much everything.
Pretty much.
It really makes you wonder, how is it that something that we achieved in the 1960s seems so much more challenging now?
Well, it is the question at the heart of all of this, isn't it? And it's tempting to think we could just dust off the old blueprints.
Yeah.
But the world and space exploration have changed drastically since the Apollo missions.
So what are the biggest differences this time around? What makes a modern lunar mission so different from those glory days of Apollo?
Well, for starters, the geopolitical landscape is completely different. The Apollo missions were fueled by this intense pressure of the Cold War, a race against the Soviets that gave NASA basically a blank check and a sense of urgency that we just don't see today.
It was like a space race sprint.
Exactly.
And now it's more like a marathon, right?
A marathon with multiple runners.
Okay.
International collaboration is at the heart of Artemis, with partners like Japan, Canada, the UAE, and the European Space Agency.
Mm-hmm.
And while this brings a wealth of knowledge and resources to the table, it also means more complex decision-making processes and a greater potential for delays.
More cooks in the kitchen, as they say.
Exactly.
But I imagine budget plays a huge factor as well.
Right, absolutely.
Those Apollo missions were astronomically expensive, even by today's standards.
You're right. Adjusting for inflation, the Apollo program cost about $290 billion.
Wow.
NASA's current budget is a fraction of that. This means every dollar counts, leading to tough choices, compromises, and a much slower pace than the Apollo era.
It's like trying to build a state-of-the-art skyscraper with the budget of a garden shed.
It is a balancing act, for sure. And, it's not just about the money. One of the most interesting points the article raises is the we forgot how factor.
We forgot how.
Yeah, it's been over 50 years since we last sent humans beyond Earth's orbit.
It has been a while, yeah.
That's more time than many engineers have been alive.
That's true.
The hands-on experience, the institutional knowledge, even something as seemingly simple as like knowing which suppliers to call.
Right.
It's not as simple as just picking up where we left off.
That's incredible. I never thought about it like that. It's almost like we're trying to rebuild a lost civilization, piecing together fragments of knowledge. Are there any specific examples that come to mind?
Absolutely. One is the art of handcrafting heat shields.
Okay.
During Apollo, skilled technicians painstakingly assembled these massive structures by hand.
Wow.
Today, we rely more on automation and computer modeling, which is incredible, but it means we've lost some of that tactile hands-on expertise.
Right.
And when the unexpected happens, as it inevitably does in space exploration, that human touch, that ability to improvise and adapt on the fly can be invaluable.
It's a reminder that technology alone can't solve everything. Sometimes it takes a human mind honed by experience to tackle the unexpected. But let's talk about the technology we do have. I mean, we've got smartphones now that can practically land a rover on Mars.
Right.
Shouldn't going back to the moon be a walk in the park by comparison?
It seems logical, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But there's a fascinating twist in the story. Remember how we talked about budget constraints?
Yeah.
Well, Congress actually mandated that NASA reuse as much space shuttle technology as possible for Artemis.
Mm.
The intention was to cut costs and streamline development, but it's turned out to be more complicated than anticipated.
Hold on, so we're trying to build a cutting-edge lunar program with spare parts from the shuttle era. That sounds like a recipe for trouble, or at least some serious headaches.
You've hit the nail on the head. The article uses this analogy of like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole.
Right.
And it's an apt one. Take, for instance, Boeing's role. They built the iconic Saturn V rocket for Apollo. And now they're responsible for the SLS core stage, the backbone of the Artemis program.
Mm.
This thing is a monster, about the size of a football field, and it's responsible for generating the immense power needed to escape Earth's gravity.
Wow.
But building it isn't as simple as just dusting off old plans. They're having to integrate 1980s technology with modern systems.
Oh, wow.
Which is a monumental engineering challenge.
So it's like trying to upgrade a vintage car to compete in a modern Formula One race. You have the classic design, but the guts need a complete overhaul.
Exactly. And it's not just the core stage. Northrop Grumman, the company behind those iconic solid rocket boosters, the ones that provide that initial surge of power,
right,
is facing similar challenges. They're incredibly powerful, but they rely on a technology that's been around for decades.
Mm.
And then there's Aerojet Rocketdyne, tasked with modifying shuttle-era engines to handle the demands of a much larger rocket and the extreme cold and vacuum of deep space.
It's mind-boggling to think about the engineering feats involved.
Yeah.
Even with the technology, another thing that feels different this time around is our approach to risk.
Yeah.
Back in the Apollo era, strapping yourself to a rocket was considered inherently risky, but there was an acceptance, a sense of we're pushing boundaries and sometimes things go wrong.
Right.
Today, that attitude feels almost unimaginable.
Yeah. You're right, it was a different time. Back then, the right stuff mentality prevailed.
Right.
The astronauts were national heroes, daredevils, pushing the limits. But our understanding of the risks, both physical and psychological, has evolved significantly. We have a much greater appreciation for the dangers inherent in space travel. And frankly, society's tolerance for those risks has diminished.
And rightfully so. These aren't just test pilots anymore.
Right.
These are scientists, engineers, explorers,
Yeah.
We're sending them on a mission of discovery, and we want them to come home safe.
Exactly. Today, safety is paramount.
Right.
We're building in redundancies, escape systems, and layers of safeguards that simply didn't exist during Apollo.
Yeah.
And while that's a good thing, it undeniably adds complexity, time, and cost to the equation.
It makes you wonder if this shift in perspective, this heightened awareness of risk and the emphasis on safety is something we see reflected in other large-scale endeavors as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The article draws a fascinating parallel to infrastructure projects.
Okay.
Think about the New York City subway system.
Okay.
Those original lines, built over a century ago, they were completed at a breakneck pace.
Yeah.
But try adding a few stations today,
Yeah.
and you're talking decades of planning, public hearings, environmental impact studies.
Right. It's like the difference between building a tree house in your backyard and constructing a skyscraper in a bustling metropolis, right?
A perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And it's not just subways. Think about aircraft carriers.
Okay.
Those behemoths used to be churned out at an incredible rate during World War II, sometimes in a matter of months. Today, building a single carrier takes well over a decade and billions upon billions of dollars.
So what's changed? Why does it seem like everything takes longer and costs more now?
Well, the article highlights this rise of what they call citizen voice.
Citizen voice.
Public input and scrutiny are now integral to any large-scale project, and rightfully so.
Right.
Environmental impact assessments, community engagement, ensuring that projects align with societal values.
Right.
These factors simply weren't part of the conversation in the 1960s.
It's a more holistic approach, for sure.
It is.
And while it might mean a slower pace, it also reflects a more thoughtful, collaborative, and arguably more mature approach to tackling big challenges.
Precisely. And this brings us back to Artemis.
Okay.
Yes, it's facing delays, and yes, the budget is eye-watering.
Yeah.
But perhaps, instead of viewing these as failures, we should see them as markers of a different kind of ambition.
Okay.
Artemis might not have the same breakneck speed of the space race,
Yeah.
but it embodies a more sustainable, globally collaborative vision for space exploration.
It's less about planting a flag and declaring victory and more about laying the foundation for a lasting human presence in space.
Exactly. And here's something else to consider.
Okay.
The article mentions that public support for the Apollo missions at the time was actually quite low.
Really?
Many people questioned the cost, the risk, the value of it all.
Which is fascinating because it makes you wonder, does this slower, more deliberate approach with Artemis actually increase its chances of long-term success?
That's a good question.
If we're building a more transparent, collaborative, and globally supported program, perhaps that's the key to finally breaking free of Earth's gravity and establishing a truly sustainable presence in space.
It's a question worth pondering.
Yeah.
And it speaks to, I think, a larger pattern.
Okay.
Sometimes the most enduring achievements aren't born from urgency or competition, but from careful planning, collaboration, and a deep understanding of the stakes involved.
A lot to think about, wouldn't you say?
A lot to think about.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, here's one final thought to leave you with.
Okay.
The article mentions that we build things better now than we did in the past. More durable, safer, more efficient.
We do.
Do you think that's inherently true?
I think so.
And if so, does that justify the increased time and cost of projects like Artemis? Is there a point where the pursuit of perfection becomes an obstacle to progress? Just some food for thought.
Lots to chew on.
As always, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back next time with another fascinating topic, ready to unpack the complexities of the world around us.